Yes. Today, I want to preach a sermon entitled Educating the Conscience. If you're writing notes, I want you to write in your book, Educating the Conscience. Educating the conscience. More than ever before, this is a very important conversation to have with us as individuals, as husbands, as wives, as parents, as ministers of the gospel, as children in homes, wherever you are at in life. This is one of the most important messages of the 21st century. Somebody say, Amen. Now, the theme scripture is Proverbs 23 verses 7, as many of us or some of us have read it. Really, what captures there in essence, the conviction of the hour is, as a man thinketh, so is he. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Not so does it become, not so does will he be, but primarily what you're thinking, where your conscience is now, is where you are now. Where your thoughts are now is where you are now. Now, by definition, and I want us to define this firstly from a dictionary perspective. If you open your Oxford, your Macmillan, or whatever dictionary you're using, if you were to go in the dictionary to look for this word conscience, the dictionary would define it as a person's moral sense of right and wrong. It's viewed as acting as a guide to one's behavior. That's what the dictionary defines it as. A person's moral sense of right and wrong. And that is the guiding light to how somebody behaves in life. Now, there is a big problem with that definition. Because when you say that the conscience is a person's moral sense of right and wrong, that means it's up to the person in what they think is right and what they think is wrong. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is relative. Because what you think is right might not be thought right by another individual. And what you think is wrong might not be regarded wrong by another individual. There has to be a sort of central definition that reconciles all men, that will bring together all the thoughts and ideas of all men to come to the mutual agreement that we can all agree or assent that this is right and this is wrong. Of course, there's objective moral law. It's generically appreciated by all cultures, almost all people in the earth. Things like murder. Almost everybody believes that murder is wrong. Dishonesty is wrong, and honesty is right. Things like that. However, when we get into the deeper definition of these words, the nuances start to come out. That means, in principle, it becomes very dangerous to define moral law only by the perspectives and opinions of men. Look at the theory, for those of you who have studied philosophy. Look at this. There's a theory called cultural relativism, for instance, that the culture you come from has a definition of right and wrong, And the culture your neighbor comes from has a definition of right and wrong. And they might not both agree. That's why people say, oh, this person is ethnocentric. Ethnocentrism is the place where you judge other people or cultures based on your own culture and understanding of life. So what is culture? Culture is a set of values, beliefs, norms, and artifacts. I always emphasize the artifacts because when people are defining culture, they forget artifacts. What are artifacts? Artifacts are invaluable objects, either made by a people or modified to suit their narrative. For example, those of you who come from the Buganda culture, we have a certain drum called Engalabi, right? There's a drum called Engalabi. It's a unique drum, but that is known for our culture in Buganda. It's an artifact. It's an important thing. It's an object that if somebody sees, they would say, or there's a way we understand the back cloth. It's part of the materials that we used back in the day for clothes. So a back cloth is a very powerful object in the Buganda culture. The Middle Eastern culture might not understand the essence or importance of the back cloth because they have their own artifacts too. The Roman Catholics have a rosary that they'll put it on, and even before speaking, when you see a rosary on a person, you tell this is a Roman Catholic. So artifacts are important as well to be recognized. So different value systems, different norms, different ideals belonging to a specific group of people. That is culture. The shorter root word, the word there is cult, cultere, right? It has to belong to a group, Latin, cultere. It has to belong to a group of people. Shared values, shared beliefs, shared norms, shared artifacts, right? Now, I'll give you an example of, in Uganda here, some of us remember, I don't know whether it's still existent, but there was a prevalent culture in one tribe where females were mutilated. Their genitalia was mutilated. And so it became a very big concern, female genital mutilation. How many of you remember that time? I don't know whether it's still existent now. Could be, we don't know. But there are cultures who just believe that if a girl is raised at a certain point, they have to mutilate a part of her genitalia. Now, in one's world, they're like, oh my God, that is so wicked and strange. But in another culture, or another tribe, some people are like, that's who we are. So we need a balance somewhere. We need a balance somewhere. If some of you have read history, some Middle Eastern cultures believed in marrying off children very early. Matter of fact, there is a prophet Noah who betrothed a young girl, probably she was 8 years. This was culture. But how many parents here can escort their old 8-year-old girl to another man's family? They vary. And people are willing to die for their cultures. You don't underestimate that. It's out of that that then even the deeper ethical questions come. The question of the utilitarian. You know, how many of you have heard of the term utilitarianism? It's the thought or school of thought that says If somebody is happy with something, then it's okay for them to do it or have it, or to define as good for them. It doesn't matter whether it affects you, but it matters that it makes them happy. There's this term called hedonism. The thought that it's the one goal of all humanity, only to pursue one thing, happiness, at the expense of many things. As long as you are happy, go for it. So there are questions of judgment in pursuit of happiness. How far should I express myself? If I feel like taking a drug will make me happy, that's my choice. I feed my pleasure and go the way of the flesh. As of whether it's destructive to me, it's none of your business. The hedonist would argue. So the utilitarian would say, is this good, for example, for the general public, the mass, the critical mass? If we are 100 people and 90 of us think that this is good for us, therefore, it is right for us. Whether it is wrong for the 10, it is right for the 9. Sorry, for the 100. For the 90, sorry. Yeah, 90 over 100. Yeah. So if it's wrong for the 10, but the 90 are agreeable with it, the utilitarian would say, that's okay. It's working. That's the foundation of democracy. If all of us think that this is the right way to go, it doesn't matter whether in truth it's the right way. If we have all agreed that it is, the majority of us agreed, then that goes for law or policy. And then you start to ask the harder questions, whether you can trust democracy as it has been designed to lead humanity to that perfect harmony and reconciliation of all things, touching truth, and leaves very hard questions. Personally, in my journey of understanding these things, I now even question, not that I have a problem with democracy, but I have questions on how democracy, absolute democracy, answers some of the hard questions. For instance, let's just say you have 10 people and 9 of them are mad, and 1 of them is sane. And you want to pass a policy where 9 people are mad and 1 is sane. One man said that when the madness of an entire nation disturbs a solitary mind, you could even assume that this solitary mind is the mad one. That a nation can get to a certain madness, that the 2-3 people who are normal start to look like they're the mad ones. Democracy. Those of you who think that it's really the answer, yet one example is run by a monarch, like say United Arab Emirates, right? It's a monarchical system, isn't it? And you go to one of the most democratic nations in the world like America, and they are shooting their presidents down. Are you seeing what I'm saying? That if I was to get a crime rate, just take a sample of an area in a very democratic nation and say a nation that might not seem democratic, and then we take a sample of 24 hours and just number the crimes in one nation against the other, you might be amazed. But you know, somebody will say, you don't know what you're saying. That's why I tell people that there are 2 ways of seeing things wrongly. One way, is if you are far from a thing, you might see something wrongly. For example, a billboard is far. You might see the words, but they're ambiguous. And then you're required by principle to come closer to be able to read. That's an easier place. But the harder one, and where I find that sometimes we get things wrong, is when something is so close. For instance, can you read a book when you put it here? Somebody might assume that, I'm right because I'm the closest to this issue. You don't know anything. For me, I'm a politician. We work in the system. There are many things you don't know. For you, speaking as a layman. And sometimes the perfect balance here is to really find the right vantage point of sight where you're not really so far not to see and not so near not to see. Who gets what I'm saying? I know people who judge issues wrongly because they are so in this thing. You've heard of people sometimes complaining in different parts of the world that our politicians are very inconsiderate. They don't even see, they say, the plight of people. It's as if they don't know that people are poor. It's as if they... And rightly so, it's because some of them are so close to the script that they might not see. Are you following what I'm saying? I'm starting to think that there's a deeper conversation that we must have. Because I have said before that the challenge with the present day Christianity, and this the Lord spoke to me very honestly, is that we're not a contemplative people. We don't actually sit down to allow conversations with God. That's why we don't find so much wisdom among the saints. Because we don't take time to really sit down with God to speak and educate us. We are conformed to this world. We've taken over its attitudes and ideals, its superficial customs, the Bible says. So there's harder questions there. There's harder questions there. You see God get Moses out of Egypt because there are things Moses will not see if he is in the palace. Who is getting it? So God has to take him outside for him to see right. You see God deliberately take Saul out of Jerusalem. He was a teacher of the law. And then he's taken him to Damascus. And he still sees that even the vision there is not full. He pushes him further to Arabia. And when he spends those years in Arabia, he comes back a very changed man. Why? Because God took him out of the camp. In Galatians, he says that I did not go to Jerusalem. He says, neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia and returned unto Damascus. 3 years, he goes to Jerusalem, now to reconcile issues with Peter, because God has taken him out so he would see. That's why in Hebrews it says, let us go without the camp, bearing his reproach, that there is a price to go out. There is a price, ladies and gentlemen, when a man zooms out. A huge price, because you lose so much right and privilege that some would rather actually keep than sacrifice for the sake of seeing better. Spiritual blindness is a very interesting thing, because it could happen to the man who appears or thinks to see better because he's close to something. Are you following what I'm saying? That is why it's important sometimes to listen to people who are outside their understanding and interpretation of the matters within. I'll give you an example. This average Ugandan, right? When I look at, for example, let me take, for instance, a nation like America. Great nation, great nation, great nation. And for most of the part, I think that some of them living in that nation don't see what some of us outside are able to see. Like they might rightly be able to see things on our nation that we're not able to see and appreciate. That an American can take a flight to come to Uganda, buy a property somewhere in Jinja, invest in a mine or something and build wealth in Jinja. And a young man born and bred there is leaving Jinja, getting a visa to go to South Carolina to work. So this man outside is like, how can you come here where there's no gold in the ground, yet you have the gold in your land? Why? Because he has a perspective that the Ugandan is not able to see. Now look at their politics, for example. Now we are talking judgment, right? You have set two presidents. One of them says, I have good policies on A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I support an agenda X, Y. And then there's one who says, I also have policies, but I have questions in some of the issues discussed in that agenda. For instance, that a child at 8 years old or 9 can be given hormone enhancement treatment because they don't feel fit in that body. 8 years. Oh, we're preparing them for their journey. At 8, they're allowed to change their clothes. At 8, they're allowed to start adjusting to the body they feel they belong to. Somebody says, no. One of the presidents says, I have a problem with that. Why? Because an 8-year-old is not yet mature enough to make that kind of decision. But that one is also judging the other culture that married off a child at 8. If you think that this 8-year-old is not yet mature enough to get married, how do you think then that they're mature enough to even understand who they are? Are you seeing the questions? Please follow me. So one of them is saying, this is what I think. Another one is saying, this is what I think. And everyone has their own supporters. Are you following what I'm saying? Somebody says, no, I think I have a problem with that. I have a problem with that. That at 8, a child is allowed to say, am I this, am I he? No, let's wait for them to grow. No. Someone says, no, let's start now the treatment now. Regardless of whether the parent agrees or they don't. Are you following what I'm saying? Regardless of whether the parent what? Agrees or they don't. In fact, I think it was one state, is it California, where now a child would be allowed to make their own decisions touching their life with a teacher, and they're not obligated, even the teacher is not obligated to tell the parent of the child. That some schools in that nation have more power over the children than the parents do. Because the child is a registered property of that nation. If we are educating this way, that's our choice. You have no choice over that 8-year-old. They could arrest you and take the child away if they must. 8. So one president says, it's okay. Another one says, it's not. Then one says, it's okay for abortion. I think one of the terms of one of those presidents was even to a point where even an 8-month-old child could be removed. Pre-birth abortion. The mother doesn't want, they get a say, a syringe, and they take it through into the heart of that child and stop it. And then one says, no, why should you kill this human being? And then this one is bad because it's saying don't kill a human being. But this one has a problem, that this one is building borders around the nation. How can you separate a mother from a child? But you're killing. Who understands what I'm saying? For you, your policy is killing. You allow a woman to kill their child. And you feel you're right than the person who is saying put a boundary. You get? So that's the one they will have to shoot. Because how can he even think? How can he stand in the way of this 8-year-old child to choose? That's the one they say put a bullet. That's the one the media will attack. So even us, they don't like us already. You get my point? Now, then the question comes, what if I have two individuals? One might have bad policies, but one has some moral values. One has good moral values, but has a few weak policies, say in finances and development. Then I have another one who has very good policies in finances and development, but has issues with moral values. His moral values I don't agree with. This actually now, some of you who are mature are starting to understand this, is going to become the new normal of debating politics. It's not going to be about, oh, this policy, that policy. It's going to be about what do you believe, which agenda are you taking? Now today, no movie is acted without an agenda. No program is put on television without an agenda. Even the advertisement of a product like a car has to be advertised under an agenda. Are you following what I'm saying? And there are people here who don't have a clue. See, agenda, what is agenda? Don't worry, the Spirit of God will help you understand this. So are you seeing where we're going? So now, for example, if you look at the American elections coming, it's going to be around two things: the LGBT agenda and the abortion issue. Those are the top. I'm telling you. So now I see this preacher who has a problem, for example, with Trump, and he supports, say, the other one, but he's a man of God. He's a man of God. And he says, okay, this Trump fellow doesn't like black people. He says, he doesn't like black people. Somebody will be like, why are you discussing politics? I'm actually not in politics. Some of you, if you're mature, you should be picking what I'm saying. Oh, he doesn't like black people. Okay, so let me just say he doesn't like me, but he agrees to my conviction of moral value. Do I vote a man who might not like me, but agrees with the conviction of my moral value, or I vote a man who loves me, but does not agree with my moral value? Now, you have the general mass that just for it supports everything. You're right, the roads are bad. No, you understand? You're right. In fact, they're charging us so much money in this, and then they scream. But now there's a wiser one who can say, okay, if this issue can stir this person to support this, then I could actually fund this to stir them up against an order, if in essence it will raise something that will provide for my agenda. And then you see Christians also moving by that wind. Judgment. Consciences are defined by how you're raised. Formal education or informal education. So if you're starting to teach a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old about sex, and you teach them a skewed interpretation or understanding on sex, you've raised them up that way. You have changed their conscience. Or the informal, what you learn in your home, what your parents raised you to be. Some of you, the reason why your marriages are failing is because you were raised wrong. You were raised wrong. You think the way you're talking to your mother is the way you're going to talk to your husband. Oh. Don't. You see what I'm saying? You think that the way you saw your mother and father talking at each other is the way. For me, one time a lady says, for me, my father raised me this way. So even if I'm married to you, this is how my father raised me. He treated my mother this way, so you have to treat me that way. Oh, look for your father. Hey. Do you understand what I'm saying? For me, my mother used to do this. So if a woman who doesn't do this, hey, can't live with your mother. Are you following what I'm saying? And then you have people who are like, for me, I'm hot-tempered. So you're marrying me, you're pissed up, but you must understand I'm a hot-tempered man. So you're entering this marriage in that understanding. Some people are building conscience based on contract values. That if something is agreeable between two people, even if it's wrong generally, but for us, we agree with it, it's right. If me and this person agree that this is good, it's good for us. What's your business? Mind your business. So that's where we are now. Now I'm talking to our young generation, the young people, because that's the most disorganized bunch. I mean, you go on YouTube. I was telling people in the first service, this millennial Gen Z, those guys can abuse. They're the most vulgar beings I've ever seen. You go on YouTube. If somebody sees a YouTube video of a person, they don't even hear the content. And they start abusing. Verbal artillery. These XYZ. Like, these are employees at workplaces too. These are husbands and wives, mothers raising children also. Are you following what I'm saying? I watched in horror a couple of weeks ago some video just dropped before my phone, and I was curious. They were asking this artist. In Uganda, he composed a very vulgar song. It was very, very dirty and obscene. So they asked this artist, why do you sing vulgarity? Why are you singing obscene words? And he says, you know, Ugandans, when you sing things like hard work, commitment, responsibility, integrity, they don't listen. Who saw that thing? Put up your hand if you saw it. Yeah. If you didn't see it, it's not yours. So this guy said that for them, they just want to hear obscene words. And indeed, the thing hit top of the charts. Are you seeing the problem we have? That somebody has studied society and realized that if you want to sell a song, you need to be as vulgar and obscene as you should be. Then people will watch that song. Even the kids will dance to it. You see? But if you sing about hard work, being faithful, they won't come to your show. Look at comedians now. Do you know many years ago we used to watch comedians and you actually laughed from the heart? Do you know now you can't watch a comedian? Because once you switch on, he's going to say something vulgar. And the moment he says it, the people in the audience are going to laugh. And if you have the Holy Spirit, it will grieve you. The strangest thing is finding a Christian who is also and you're like, how broken is this individual? Are you learning something? That is why I made a personal commitment with God. even if I'm watching something and it is very entertaining, and then I hear something that provokes or offends the God in me, I'll switch it off immediately. That's the truth. Even if it's a night's movie, something provokes you, because now, you know, the subliminal mind is an interesting thing, because something can be planted in your subliminal, the subconscious mind in your life, even without knowing. An innocent video, or so probably a comedy. Huh? One time I was on a flight, you know those things where you say, let me just watch something to laugh a bit. Huh? And then somebody is in a comedy, and then something is done funny. And then this guy said, he used 3 words. He said, Jesus. Then in the middle, he put an F word, and then he put Christ at the end. You get my point? The moment he said it, my heart was stricken. This fellow is offending the person of Christ. I switched it off immediately. You know why? Because now I understand the agenda. The agenda of that opera or that soap or that comedy was not to make people laugh, but it was designed deliberately to plant a certain seed of rebellion against the way of God. Now, there are people who hear those words and just bypass them and continue watching. It's hard for me, because our consciences, some of us are still alive. But when your conscience is seared, you'll not even know. Are you following what I'm saying? It dies slowly. Some of you might say, what's wrong with the Europeans? What's wrong with... No, listen, they are also human beings like you, and they had values and systems like you did once. But the consciousness is shifted. One of the shifters is the arts. These songs, these movies we're watching, when we were little, I remember switching on television, watching an innocent movie, and then 2 people kiss. And then your father's like, hey, look away. Right? But something is planted. Something is what? It's growing. Before you know that, it's easy for you to see people kissing. And then, you know, the devil starts now exposing it. The demon, Baal Peor. That spirit responsible for exposing sexual acts. Some of you baptize it with more humble words like public display of affection. Affection, they say. And then you find, especially now you Africans, you find 2 African people, they are kissing in public. What's... And you know, there's somebody saying, hey, Apostle, what's wrong with it? Because if you start that, then what happens next? How many of you know that there's a country in Europe where there is a day where they walk naked? Some of you didn't know. Like 2 or 3 countries I know. So one of those days I'm seeing this. They have naked day where they put on Adam's suit and they walk naked. And then you see this naked guy on a bike. Yeah. Now, there's somebody says, but for me, I just kissed my wife in public and then we did this. But those ones, no, it started that way. But I'll be yo. Listen, and I'm talking to you both from primarily Christian. We must know how not to conform to the standards of the world. how not to know, how not to conform. Because those people don't have a conscience. That is why when we define conscience, I give you this definition. My definition is conscience, and you'll know why, is the God-given. I want to use the word God-given because if we have to find a law that unifies all, we have now to think of a source higher than humanity. That's why we bring in the God equation. Because if you go to a man who does not know God and then you are defining conscience, you're already in trouble. Because imagine a mind without God defining moral value, defining good and bad without God. And this is the question many people want to avoid. That's why when Paul warns us against philosophers and what, some people are, he says, beware, Colossians 2:8, lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceits, after the traditions of men, after the rudiments of this world, not after Christ. Because you can be deceived. I call it the seduction of language. The people who think that someone is as true as they are articulate in language, and language can seduce. That's the thing about philosophy. A man can appear to know so much, yet everything he knows is from hell. There are many people whose God is philosophy. Everything that they find logical and reasonable for them is true and right, and is the guiding light of living life. They want to build a moral law without God, and those are societies that are failing. That is why you hear them pass laws that are so strange to proper, and they no longer can sense anymore. You heard of the story of a judge in America. This guy had a history of raping women. He had a history of raping women. Then he goes and says, now I feel in my body I'm a woman. When I was raping, I was a man. Now in my body, I feel I'm a woman. I'm no longer a man. So the judge thus rules that because this man now feels he's a woman, he should be put in a woman's prison. And the fellow goes to the women's prison and he still has his member. Do you know the are you listening to me? Is somebody understanding what I'm saying? Is somebody understanding what I'm saying? So the ninja is in prison with women because he has a and this was ruled by a judge whose parents took her to school. She probably has a doctorate in fields. How did this woman get to that level? We're trying to define judgment and moral law